So Sophia, we are so excited to have you kind of kick off this series for us about how to live a circular life. And I kind of want to frame it though also about your personal sustainability journey. Something for those of you kind of that have just tuned in, Stuart and I founded Thousand Fell about 2 years ago and launched 3 or 4 months ago. And something that's been super important to us is kind of like really instilling that idea that it's just about taking us one step at a time, and that everybody's on their own journey, and there's no right or wrong way, but that the sum of small parts will really add up. And I think that kind of meeting you last year, following you for the past few months, you definitely walk the walk and kind of speak to that, and definitely don't keep sustainability. So we're really excited to speak with you.
Yeah, thanks so much. Yeah, I really resonate with like everyone's on their own sustainable journey. I think there's so much shaming and like cancel culture that kind of comes along with this space, which is like so unfortunate, because you're not gonna like shame someone to change their behavior patterns if they've been doing that their entire life. You know, if you are from a culture, like I have a lot of Latin American friends like from Brazil, and they've been eating beef their entire life, and it's like you can't shame them to stop eating something that's like literally a part of their culture. So everyone's 100%. On their journey, no matter where you are, as long as you're on a journey, then that's amazing.
Right. Exactly. It's about reducing where you can, making simple steps or taking simple steps, but also even about with education, it's about starting at the beginning and bringing people along the journey. Because I think even for us, it's been such a journey. It's starting a brand, looking into sourcing. And it's kind of what I'd love to get into with you today is how did you even start? And how, because I think it's even something that people are afraid to speak out about because they're afraid to say the wrong thing.
Yeah, totally.
So would love to just kind of start with like who you are, your career, your background, like how did you get into journalism? You worked at Vogue. Just start at the beginning.
Yeah, totally. Well, when you're like, with sustainability, a question that I'd love to ask before panels, like if we were all in person, I would ask, and maybe you guys actually can comment in the comments, like comment if you're on, like if there's a sustainability spectrum, like let's say Greta Thunberg is on one end of the spectrum where she doesn't take planes, she like doesn't go to school so she can protest, and she's like completely, on that end. Like put in an emoji of your arm raising if you're on the Greta spectrum. And usually like during the panel, like no one would raise their hands because it's not like people have the capabilities to be like taking Olympic sailing teams across the Atlantic Ocean every time they need to travel. And then I'm like, okay, on the other end of the spectrum, who would be a Steve Bannon who, doesn't even believe in climate change? And it just shows you like these are the two opposite ends of the spectrum when it comes to sustainability. And everyone's in the middle. No one's like a Steve Bannon or a Greta Thunberg. Everyone's in the middle. And that's like, there's kind of a relief in that where you're like, I'm with the majority of people in the world who are like all just trying to do something. So yeah.
I love that. Yeah, there's such a pressure, it feels like, when you want to talk about sustainability to be closer to Greta on the spectrum. But I think it's okay, even if you're changing one or two things. And we have to be inclusive and accepting of that and celebrate that.
Yeah, and those are two extremes, and it's amazing that we have those vantage points, but we're not gonna, it's okay if you're not a Greta. It's okay if you don't, use a sailboat every time you need to travel. Like that, we're not shaming you for that.
100%. Well, maybe you could start for us. Like, how did you get started in journalism? How did that lead to advocacy? And then how did you eventually transition into sustainability and climate advocacy?
Yeah. So I studied journalism and fashion when I was in school, and one of my first internships and jobs was actually in trend forecasting, and that was kind of like journalism because you look at all these different arms in every different industry, like art, science, architecture. My parents are both scientists. My dad's a neuroscientist and my mom's a biostatistician. So I've always been on that end. But journalism, I just was always super curious and studied it did trend forecasting, worked at fashionista.com, was an intern there, and then got interviewed at Vogue.com when Vogue.com didn't even exist. Like, they owned the URL link, but it was just yeah, it was like, well, it was launched, but it was like basically repurposing only content from print. There was no like original content or anything. Started as like a freelancer temp, and then like after 4 years of being there, like worked my way up from like, then there was like, when I started, it was like 5 to 7 people on the team, and then after 4 years, like we went to about like 50 people on the team at one point. You know, was working with a team that like launched most of Vogue's social channels and digital channels. So really helped curate and solidify what the Vogue digital and social voice was with the team that I worked with. And then left, and I really wanted to get back into journalism and other topics more than just fashion, because of my background. And then also sustainability. I was always really into sustainability because I grew up, every summer I would go to China. When I was younger, I lived in China, and that was like a firsthand experience. Yeah, it was a firsthand experience at being like, whoa, this is what's going to happen to our environment and our country if we don't manage overpollution and overconsumption. And like, my dad lives in China. He moved back there, and he can only drive like when it's normal times. He can only drive every other day. He has to wear a surgical mask or N95 mask, not because of a flu or anything, but because the air pollution is so bad. And I just realized like that would be kind of the future of where we are if we didn't start taking care and being aware of that. And then also I remember like my older sister had a wedding in Mendocino in north of San Francisco. And we were like in these beautiful, like Big Sur looking cliffside views. And my family from China was taking pictures of the blue sky instead of this cliffside view, because they haven't had blue skies in so long. Like, they just have like gray, cloudy skies because of pollution. So that's like the little things that I'm like, how, like, to be like, oh, a blue sky is so amazing. So yeah.
Yeah, where in China does your dad live?
He lives in Hangzhou right now.
Really?
In Hangzhou. Yeah.
Hangzou's beautiful.
Yeah, it is a beautiful place.
I have basically a super similar story. I lived in Wuhan for a year.
Oh, you lived in Wuhan. Wow. How crazy is that?
Crazy, because now it's known.
Yeah.
So I did a postgraduate program and lived in China for like 2.5 years. And that's actually where Stuart and I met. We met in Shanghai, but I had lived in Wuhan. And when my friends from Wuhan came to visit me in California, I don't know, 3-4 years ago now, she was in a like Walmart or Best Buy parking lot. Like, before she came to me, she did a couple of other city stops, and she posted an album, and it was all like a parking lot. And I was like, what are you taking a photo of? And she was like, the blue sky. It's the brightest blue sky I'd ever seen.
Yeah.
And you don't think about it, but I had my first Vogue mask while living in Wuhan, and like, I had to wear an N95 mask daily because the pollution there is often much worse than even Beijing. And
yes.
And so yeah, I mean, it's crazy to think about. It's a beautiful, beautiful country, and Wuhan's surrounded by mountains, but I couldn't even see them most days.
Yeah. And you see these amazing stories right now where, like, in Mumbai, which is like the most polluted city in the world, like they like, everyone is so happy because they haven't seen clear blue skies and clouds in like years. And now you can see like the Himalaya mountains from cities. Yeah. So
that's an incredible background. And so what was it like though? Because you started, and I see some also questions from the audience, but you started as a journalist and you started in fashion and you got to Vogue.com. And then how did that transition happen to get into sustainability, climate advocacy, and sustainable fashion? Was it a natural transition? Did you have to, like, a couple of years ago, kind of like forge your own path? Was there even like such a thing as a sustainable or sustainability journalist? What was that?
Yeah. So that's such a great question. So like, so like ever since I was really young, I was always aware, environmentally aware. And like I used to live in Memphis, and Al Gore is from Memphis. So like when The Inconvenient Truth came out when I was like in middle school, I remember being obsessed with that documentary. So it was always a part of me. Like I remember at Vogue.com, we did a lot of like environmental pieces and articles. Like we covered COP21 with activist Cameron Russell and did a whole series and portraits. But no one cared for it. Like there's no thirst for it, especially in fashion industry.
Right.
And I think in other industries that has been more advanced, but in the fashion industry, I think we usually are like the trendsetters, but in the fashion industry, it was really slow to adapt to sustainability. But when I left, I've always been trying to do work around sustainability, and I just kept doing it little by little. And then finally, like sustainability even became a term, like on a mass scale. And
Right.
I just started like trying to communicate. Like first I remember just sharing, like, because sustainability, all of a sudden it was like overnight, like people were throwing out that term and it was like such a buzzword. And I was like, I'm gonna actually, like, what does sustainability even mean? Like,
Yes.
does it mean environmentalism? Does it mean eco-friendly? Does it mean green? Does it mean organic? You know, like all these words were like using interchangeably. And so I was just like breaking it down and just like following what I naturally love. So
That's actually, I see a couple questions here, but it's actually a really good segue into something I wanted to ask you to kind of kick off.
yeah.
The larger discussion was terminology. Like, could we just even, just for everybody listening, define sustainability versus zero waste versus circularity, or any other terms you want to throw in? Like, how have you made sense of the space? Because it is somewhat convoluted or crowded, and there's this term greenwashing, and it's really hard at the consumer level to know what is what. And so maybe we could just kind of start with kind of a frame up.
Yeah, totally. So sustainability, like on a macro level, is a lifestyle, really. It's being aware that every action you take has a reaction in the earth. So every time you buy something, every time you fill up your car with oil, like whatever it is, and that relates to both the consumer level, like on an individual level, and on a business level. Like, so on a business level, it's like every time they, buy land and use deforestation, like every action we have has a reaction. That's how I think of sustainability in my own terms on a macro level.
I love that. Every action that we have has a reaction.
Yeah. And then in the fashion industry, sustainability, I characterize it by, I usually use 3 different things. It's like 1, materials, 2, fair trade and fair prices. The workers who are supplying in the supply chain, that they're being treated fairly, because basically with fast fashion, someone somewhere is paying. If you're paying for a $10 t-shirt, someone else is paying by making like 10 cents a day.
Right.
And then the third one is being philanthropic and giving back to the cause. So whether it's planting a tree or donating sales proceeds, and not just on Earth Day, but like the core mission. I believe that a brand, because you're already a brand, so that means you're a fashion brand, which means you can't even be sustainable, really, means that you're giving back to the cause, whether it's carbon offsetting or something. So those are my 3 ways of understanding for sustainable fashion versus sustainability.
Awesome.
Yeah.
What about like zero waste or circularity?
Yeah. So zero waste is, well, in my opinion, I am like a little bit like, I view it from like a spiritual level and a nuanced level.
Oh no.
See me?
Yeah, you're back.
Yeah. I don't think humans can be 100% zero waste technically, because we are alive. That means we have a carbon footprint. Like right now, I'm breathing out carbon dioxide. So I'm already having a footprint here. I think zero waste is like amazing who pursue it. It's basically having no waste, like no, Like I have friends who are zero waste and they don't even have trash cans in their house. They either compost everything or they recycle everything. But the reality is, on a more nuanced level, like all of your things that you put into recycling don't get recycled. Like there's some wild statistics that like, you know, less than 20% of things are actually recycled. So that means it still goes to landfills. So you can have the intention of being zero waste, but I don't think anyone, personally, I don't think anyone is 100% zero waste.
100%. And what about circularity?
And circularity is
this could be have to be related to your personal life. Just for everybody, what is like if you see something circular or you hear about the circular economy as a journalist, how do you like describe or define that?
Yeah, I think circularity is just designing. Well, circular fashion is designing without waste, and I think circularity you always see circularity being defined as a circle. So it's like production. And I actually think circularity, I heard that circularity is actually like a slinky. It's like this. Because what's going to happen is that it's not going to be a perfect circle every time. Because at one point, your materials, like plastic, is not always recyclable. It will be melted down so much at one point, it can't go back into the circle. And materials, anything like that, it can't go back into the production system. So it has to go somewhere, and that means it will be biodegradable or it would be good for the planet instead of like a like something that will never decompose.
Yeah.
So that's why it's like the slinky, because the slinky is like, you know, it'll go into the production cycle, but then it'll go here and then it'll go into this, you know, like.
I've actually also heard it described as a butterfly diagram.
Oh, I like that. Yeah.
I think the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, if you like take one of their courses, they break it down as a butterfly. But like there might be different end lives or half lives depending on how many times you've used something. So something might eventually end up getting burned, waste to energy, or going to compost, or but hopefully the idea is like we're never sending toxic chemicals or particles to landfill.
Yeah, exactly.
And there will have to be like new inputs. But basically, so that's super helpful. And I think within the consumer sphere, we see a lot of products marketed as zero waste and a lot of conversations going on about a zero waste lifestyle. And that's a lot of pressure. If you like live in New York, for example, and you're starving, you stop at a bodega and you grab a protein bar that comes in a wrapper, like, what do? That's not zero waste. And so I think removing that pressure, that everything you do has to be zero waste, and it's more about cutting down where you can and making consistent choices that make bigger change. So and we'll get to what some of those could be. But that's kind of how I like to think about starting to lead a lower waste lifestyle.
Yeah.
And then with circularity, it's about, for me, it's really a focus on thinking about where things go when you're done with them. And choosing, because the first step is, as you said, designing out waste, but then choosing products or services that also have an outcome that leaves no waste, where like maybe you're a part of the rental economy, or maybe you're a part of the resale economy. I heard somebody ask that, or saw somebody ask that. We'll get to all these questions.
Yeah.
But those are good entry points into circularity, where we're keeping products in use as long as possible and we're minimizing waste at end of life.
Yes, it's basically keeping a product in the system of business as long as possible, so then it can always be of value, so it's not going to landfills. And actually, if you think about like the basic of how to live a circular life, like we have all lived that. And I actually always say that before I even, you know, like realized what environmentalism or sustainability was, I was living that life with my parents. Like, and if anyone has like immigrant parents or grandparents, you know that they're like the OG like circularity, sustainable people, because they will reuse everything. Like they will reuse like you know, a tomato jar sauce, and then they'll reuse it for their beauty products, and then they'll reuse it, you know, like they're constantly reusing. Like when we were younger, like we had these like big ice cream bins, and that would be reused for our toy sets, you know, like that thought process of reuse, especially in our grandparents' generation, like that was like the norm. Like back in the day, like in the 70s and 80s, like before plastic was introduced,
Totally.
Single-use plastic was only introduced in the 90s. So when that was introduced, like people would reuse the same glass milk jar and put it in the front step, and their milkman would come and refill it. Like this was all of the things we're talking about, like have already existed at one point. We just forgot about it because like the plastic industry and capitalism had come into the forefront.
Yeah, and convenience, the push for
Yeah,
convenience.
totally.
Totally. Well, so really quick, I've got a couple of questions here that I don't want to miss from different people.
Yeah.
Then we'll get into some of my other questions.
Sure.
So Antonella asked, as a storyteller, what have been some of your favorite stories and projects?
Ooh, as a storyteller, I think that, well, when I left Vogue, I really wanted to redefine what it means to be a journalist. I call myself a multimedia journalist, but I do so many things. Like I write articles, I moderate panels, I do sustainability, I have I speak at conferences, I direct campaign videos. And I think that, you know, actually after this pandemic, we're gonna all be trying to reinvent ourselves because who our identity is being redefined. Like I think a lot of people, we used to identify ourselves with like job titles. As people are like, oh, who are you? And you're like, I'm an entrepreneur. You immediately tell your job title, but it's like maybe when you're in the corporate structure of work, those titles are very fleeting, you know, like you're an editor at Vogue and then you do this and then
Right.
But some of the most impactful stories are ones where I like to promote what I like to call conscious content. And when I left Vogue, I realized we're living in the age of content pollution. And just like there's noise pollution and light pollution, we live in the age of content pollution. We actually like don't even realize how this inundation of so much content will affect us like psychologically and mentally in the long run. And we just like throw content out into this like dark ether web and be like, great, here it is.
Yeah.
But it affects us. And so I some of the most meaningful stories have been ones where I'm like, no, people need to hear this. People need to know this. People need to understand this. It's intentional, and it's not just like making people feel like shit again on the internet. And it's also just like pushing the needle forward.
100%. I love that. Especially right now, with everyone online, that content pollution has skyrocketed.
Yeah.
There's so much going on. And so I think we're in the same boat trying to figure out where can we lean in that is actually authentic to what we care about, what we're working on, and isn't adding to the noise, but is a value add. You actually kind of answered Kate's question here, but how do you use your skills as a director to bring attention to sustainability and fashion? And if you have any additional insight there.
Yeah, well, people are always like, oh, if you're so into sustainability, if you're so into the environment, why don't you just work with like activists or nonprofits or advocacy groups? Like, why don't you become like just solely like an activist? And like that might have worked at one point in history, but nowadays, like brands have just as much say and control in how consumers behave and act more than the government. You know, like brands can push policies. Well, brands could push consumers, then them push policies. So that's why I work with brands on environmentalism and sustainability, because brands actually have like the authority and the community and the power to really spread that message even further. So that's maybe a reason why I like to work with brands.
I don't know if you know Tom Zaki at TerraCycle, but
I love TerraCycle.
We love him. We work really closely with him, and we interviewed him a couple of weeks ago. And he said something super similar, but it's sometimes the government, because the question was more about like, should the government be involved, right? The government is going to take much longer, and brands and consumers and individual choice actually have a chance to move industries like the fashion industry along much faster.
100%.
Create more rapid change. And so you really are voting with your dollar when you choose to go support a brand like Reformation or Girlfriend Collective.
Yeah. Exactly. One of my favorite quotes about sustainability is that every time you buy something, you cast a vote for the world you want to live in. So it's like, if I'm going to buy a plastic bottle, that means I'm basically voting that plastic bottles exist forever in the world, you know? Or if I bring a reusable bottle to the airplane or wherever I'm traveling, then I'm telling the world that I don't want plastic in our industry. So it's like, I think we almost have gotten so used to consumerism because it's like we can pay at, just with our thumbprint, we could pay just by tapping something. Like consumerism has gotten like so desensitized, like we don't even think about buying anymore because it's so easy and accessible. But I also think during this pandemic, like we buy so much less now and we're so intentional. Like when we go to the grocery store, we're like, oh, okay, we're gonna go to the grocery store. It's like a whole day field trip. And when we buy online, it's intentional. And so I think afterwards, after the pandemic, we're going to be even more intentional in consumerism and start realizing like all these small purchases, like, oh, I'm just one person buying one plastic bottle or whatever. But then like you and 7 billion other people are saying the exact same thing. But we'll be more intentional with that, with consumerism, which I'm really excited about.
Absolutely. And one comment here, Lawrence loves your collectivism versus individualism piece.
Oh, yeah.
And a lot of people love your comment on conscious content.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Well, that's actually a really great segue into something else I wanted to talk about. Is like the words inconvenience versus convenience and sacrifice. And do you ever feel, so we'll kind of pivot now into talking about like your personal life and how you've personally shifted behaviors to become more sustainable. But do you ever feel like in order to live sustainably, you're sacrificing? And we can even talk about that in terms of price, but like you mentioned how easy it is to just purchase with the tap of your thumb or bring a reusable water bottle. How did you kind of get around kind of convenience?
Yeah. One on a more like psychological and like perspective level of sustainability, I don't think that living sustainability is a sacrifice. If anything, it's an asset to my life, because I think that the more in touch you are with yourself, and like I think mental health and sustainability goes hand in hand. So that's why I don't think it's an inconvenience, because the more you are aware of like overconsumption and capitalism, and the more you're out of tune with nature, the more you're going to be like giving into what society has told us to be doing. And the more like less aware you are of sustainability. But if you're in tune with nature, if you're in tune with yourself, if you're in tune with the planet that you want to live in, then you're going to live a sustainable lifestyle. You're going to have a different kind of mental health. And then you realize it's not an inconvenience at all. It's like the only way you want to live, because you want to live in tune with the world and the planet. And I think the well-being of our planet is reflected in the well-being of humanity.
I haven't thought about the link between mental health and sustainable action. But I think it's something that's so interesting that we learned this past year, and is I think the term is eco grief.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, and I'll have to find it and send it to you. But it's a crazy statistic. Something like 70 or 80% of Gen Z or kids in high school right now in the U.S. struggle with eco grief, and it's a top cause for early anxiety right now. It's kind of like your fear about what's going to happen to the planet 20, 30 years from now, your personal impact, how can you even make a change? You're being told way too many things.
Yes, I believe that so much.
A quick anecdote as well, and then we'll get in. I see some people are really excited to get into the personal examples, but Casper mattresses, when they talk about their brand, they talk about their kind of what they're disrupting sleep. And they look at sleep and how to sleep as this really polluted, convoluted category where you're told to do so many things as a consumer of sleep. Like drink a turmeric milk latte, don't go on your phone, don't watch TV 2 hours before bed, don't eat 3 hours before bed. Like the laundry list is so long. And most people end up getting overwhelmed. They're stressed out from work or school or whatever it is. And they like eat ice cream or chips 30 minutes before bed and sit on TikTok and like try to fall asleep and don't do it well. And we kind of, when we think about sustainability and how to live a sustainable life, it feels very similar, because you're told so many different things you should or shouldn't do. And that's across food and transportation and personal choices and fashion. And it ends up feeling overwhelming. And so for a lot of people, it ends up being like, I don't know, I'm just one person. I can't do it. Or, I'll just continue to buy these plastic water bottles because it's just too much. And so I think kind of part of our goal over the next couple of years is to figure out how we can help really streamline that conversation and make it really easy. So that you don't feel overwhelmed by all the choice for how to like continue to take steps to become sustainable.
Yeah. And I love that because like Chloe, the fact that consumers have so much pressure, like that goes back into the content pollution, like all this information overload too, and how we should live our lives when it's like you yourself know how to best live your life. But also consumers have so much pressure on them to like change the world and make the world a better place, when that really should be on some of that pressure should be given to the brands. Like there's this professor from FIT, Theanne. She's a professor of sustainability and research scientist. Theanne.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll send Theanne. I'll send you her afterwards. Yeah. But she has this amazing way of describing how brands like give the pressure of sustainability to consumers. She calls it like the hot potato of fashion. Like brands are like playing hot potato with us. They like have a hot potato, which is like all of their inventory, and they're like marking it down so we can like buy it. So many markdowns, and then they throw it to consumers and they're like, haha, you have the hot potato now. And consumers are like, okay, now we have all these like cheap fashion items or whatever, and we're playing hot potato. And then we're like, okay, we don't want it. And then we're like, we're gonna donate it. Hot potato donations like go to landfills or go to these third world countries and then disrupt their local economies. And it's like then it's like this continuous cycle of hot potato, and it's like why is it that brands like just throw that pressure on the consumers? Like it needs to be equal.
Yeah, I love that you bring up quickly donation and markdown. They're two of the like first and foremost, kind of with this COVID-19 situation, my hope is that this pushes us further away from a fast fashion model, and B, pushes us further away from designing into markdowns. Because the system that we've gotten into with bigger retailers is that retailers started to mark down, then they rely year on year on big end of year sales, Black Friday sales, end of Christmas sales, end of season sales to comp last year and to hit top line sales. So they're now buying into markdown sales and markdown units. And then creating this excess of inventory that no one really needs. And currently things that they don't sell or can't manufacture, they're incentivized to burn waste to energy.
Yes.
And it's
which then releases more
cycle where you create excess inventory to fuel a cheap markdown sales pool, and then you burn it when you can't sell it, instead of just designing consciously in the full priced, fair priced products from the outset.
100%.
And then donation's a huge problem, particularly within footwear, because 85% of all donated shoes go straight to landfill.
Yeah.
Donated clothing and shoes are really hard to get to a second user because they're intimate, so they smell bad or they're worn down. And then again, they have a huge effect on second and third world or developing countries. So it's like, how do we design into what we need in this economy and keep it local? So wait, there's a couple of questions. Let's quickly get into some of your personal choices and we'll circle back to all these questions, but some of them are really good. So Sophia, what are the main changes that you have made day to day in your personal life? And kind of like when you decided at whatever point it was, 4 years ago, 5 years ago, you're like, I'm going to start making changes. How did that start? And what were the first few things that you did?
Well, one, all of these changes are going to come super slowly. Like all the changes I'm going to say now, I've been like, it's been like marinating in my head for like maybe the last decade. So one of the, it really just touches on everything. Like one, I really try not to use single-use plastic. I don't do takeout anymore. And I know right now in New York, to support small businesses and restaurants, like you can only do takeout, but I actually like it. I will bring, if I want to support a business or restaurant that I love in my neighborhood, I live in the East Village, then I'll bring a container there and ask them to refill it. But I don't do takeout, which is a huge waste. And I don't use single-use plastic bottles. That's just like on a consumerism level. I ride my bike everywhere. Because I prefer it and I love it. But also it's just like the best way to get around for me. Like I ride my bike to Fashion Week shows, like literally with heels on. mostly try
That's
to stick
very
to it.
European of you.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. And in China, everyone rides bikes. So it's like super, yeah. I try to stick to a plant-based diet. And there'll be times when I eat fish, or there'll be times when I'll eat chicken if it's farm raised. So it's always like, it's like, I feel like with anyone on their sustainability journey, like it's not a black and white thing. And that's also a thing I want to say about sustainability. It's never a black and white answer. You will never have like, oh, save the Amazon rainforest, stop eating beef. Like that will not save the Amazon rainforest if you just stop eating beef. Like that's one part of the solution, but there's like so many nuanced layers to that. So, you know, I offset my carbon. Like there, yeah, those are just some of the little ways that there's so many other things like that are like even fun that I've been trying to, I compost, but now New York City Sanitation Department just announced that they stopped doing compost drop-offs and they're going to stop doing brown bin compost curbside pickup.
Did that go through?
Yeah, it's starting May 4th, which is so upsetting, but it's because of city budget cuts. And this is the most upsetting thing, is that when there's a recession, and we're going to experience this, when there's a recession, environmental policies are the first to go, even though like they're the most important.
Yeah.
But I've been doing things like to try to still be low waste. Wait, actually, can I show you something?
Yeah.
So like even on a smaller level, to try to be low waste, if you have scallions, you could regrow it yourself.
Really? You cut out
Yeah, so I don't know if you use scallions. I use scallions a lot in my cooking. You like basically if you cut off, you'll like chop it and then you'll leave this part with this spear part. And then you'll put it in a container with a little bit of water up to here. Yeah. And then scallions will just grow by itself in water.
I've never seen this before.
It's so easy. Like, look, this is like literally just in 1 week.
And I'll just like weekly in salads.
Yeah, I use it in rice, salads, like everything. And then you'll just constantly regrow scallions. So like even little things like that.
We have, I won't walk you over there, but we do have an avocado seed in our sink right now that we're trying to sprout from the farmer's market to see potentially if we can grow an avocado tree.
I love that.
That's the closest we've been to like growing scallions, but that's an awesome hack. Yeah.
So little things like that.
Yeah. No, I love this. It's not black and white. Even for me with food, like food is a big one that I've tested and changed over time. And I same as you, got involved with climate change and climate advocacy in high school through Inconvenient Truth. So I was trained, I don't even remember the name of it, but like Inconvenient Truth storyteller, I guess, like went around and gave speeches. And so part of like the easiest change is really food consumption, and then also fashion, clothing, consumption products, but planted like grew up in California, so planted, you know, vegetables in the backyard and started to shop local and started to really cut meat to like once or twice a week. But it's really hard, and especially like when I lived in China, I didn't have the option to cut meat. I didn't have the option to look for like grass fed. Like, yeah, exactly. I was eating what I could eat, and there's like it's generally a really plant-based diet, but there's a little bit of meat in everything. So like when you're traveling or family special occasions, or like it's not about making your life harder or shutting you off something. It's about, you know, 80% of the time, or the majority of the time, choosing, you know, the plant-based route or local, or choosing organic when you can. So I think that that's so important. A couple of other things really quickly here. So what I really, and I think I've already said this, but what I loved, unless you have other tips or tricks for daily life that you want to throw out.
Oh, I mean, there's so many. I'm like looking around my apartment because I really try to reuse everything. Like,
well, here's another question. Are there things that you've read about recently or seen that you want to start adopting? People think you're awesome. People think you're bad as hell. Other people here regrow their own scallions.
Yes, regrow scallion club. I love it. Well, because of the whole composting problem, like I actually am so devastated that they cut the composting program. I want to start composting in my apartment, and I know there's these containers that you can get that you can compost yourself. But if you like live in Brooklyn or just so are fortunate enough to have a backyard, or you're in the West Coast, it's super easy to make your own compost container without buying like the $500 ones. You just like use an old trash bin and drill holes on the side, put it over soil, and make sure you can like you're supposed to be like churning it, but you could just use a shovel and like so I want to start my own compost at my home, like at my parents' place in Virginia. They have like a huge composting pit like in our front yard that we all compost in. So I love that. Yeah.
You know what? One of the women who works with Thousand, her name's Ariana. She actually also works with Common Ground Compost in Brooklyn. So we knew about this budget cut that might pass, but I'm going to look in and I'll get back to you and see perhaps there's like local compost that you can drop off to, or maybe they're coming up with some sort of local neighborhood solution.
Yeah, like community gardens, but you have to, yeah, I think community gardens are kind of like the best outlet if you're in the city and you don't have a space to do it.
Oh, ready? There she wrote, Ariana's watching. Common Ground Compost is offering residential compost pickup for Lower Manhattan.
Wait,
that's great. So if you are in Lower Manhattan, so like I will be hopefully again in 5 weeks, look up Common Ground Compost and let's keep the composting going. Ariana, maybe you could, you had a fact about how much waste New York City composts that you had emailed me. But it saves a ton of energy. It saves a ton of landfill space. Something really quickly that blew my mind this past month. The problem with landfills is that US landfills are so well managed that they're compacted so tight.
Yeah.
And so even things that are really biodegradable, like banana peels, don't break down in United States landfills. So we have like trash excavators that are going in and finding landfills that are banana peels that are 80, 100 years old. And so that's the importance of really separating out that biodegradable waste that can break down and can become great nutrients.
Yeah. So actually one of the statistics is that New York City, so New York used to have the largest compost like pickup out of any metropolitan city. And we have sent 100 million pounds of food scraps, like have been able to save 100 million pounds of food scraps from landfills just last year, over 100 million pounds of food scraps from food waste that ended up going into compost. And not only is it saving like all of that from going into the landfills, but landfills emit methane gas, and methane, especially food waste, and methane is 15 times more potent as a greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide. So it's really contributing to like the greenhouse gas problem we have. So that's like another reason why it's just better to compost. Another thing I've been doing to try to be low waste because of the compost thing is that any veggie scraps you can freeze and then make into a veggie stock. So you know how we're all buying like veggie broth, chicken broth for cooking? All the stocks, all the things that veggie scraps like carrot heads and kale ends, and just freeze it. And then once you get a good chunk of it, like as many motley different vegetables as possible, put it into a stock, and it's like the most delicious stock you'll ever taste. Yeah.
What's Brienne's Instagram handle?
Brienne Butler?
No, Brienne, the zero waste chef that we had dinner with in the
Brienne Butler or Delgadosh. It's at by Brienne.
Yes.
Yeah.
For everybody watching, if you want to know how to cut down on waste in your kitchen, so other neat tricks like the scallion hack, Brienne, what was it again? BYBREANE. Here, I'll write it here. By Brienne. She's fantastic, and she's all about cutting down on food waste, like things like if you buy carrots at the grocery store, at the farmer's market that have tops, they're like great to throw in smoothies, like things that I just wouldn't have even thought of.
Yeah.
And so I've tested a ton of that, and then I brought him a ton of tricks for zero waste or lower waste Thanksgiving this past year.
Ooh,
So she's awesome. So Sophia, one last question from me, and then maybe we'll take some from the audience. But so what I personally think is so unique about you is that sustainability is not only a part of your personal life at home. So a lot of people are at home making trips or making swaps and swapping things out and starting to change their lifestyle, but it's also a part of your public life. And we kind of talked about this at the beginning, but it's really hard for people to want to take a stand about something like sustainability or the environment or a plant-based diet because of all the I don't know, back and forth conversation out there. And, you know, it's really not a clear topic. People have kind of different opinions. And how did you get comfortable kind of taking a stand publicly? And what has that journey been like for you to actually become a public facing advocate?
That's a great question. Well, I think first off, I was very transparent about my journey from the get-go. And I was also had never advocated myself as this perfect person, perfect sustainable person, perfect environmental person, perfect person in general. And I think a lot of the backlash we're seeing right now, even during this pandemic, of how celebrities are responding to the pandemic and all the other things, is like, if you had public influence or you were an influencer, like it was like almost being put on a pedestal, like, and now because of this pandemic, this curtain veil has been lifted and it's like, oh, we're all human. And I think from the very beginning, I just try to be like, I'm trying my best. I'm not a Greta. I'm definitely not a Steve Bannon, but I'm in the middle. And I'm going through this journey. And like, if you want to, I'm taking this journey and I'm going to take it anyways. So I'm going to share it. If you want to go on with me, great. If not, then I'm not going to shame you about it. And so it just like, and it's like kind of starting like working out or starting to train for a half marathon or something. The first 3 miles is like the hardest to run. So like the first step you take in the sustainable journey is like going to be the hardest. Like you're like, start doing one plant-based meal a day. What? And then you're like, eat a salad for lunch or eat pasta for dinner without any cheese. And you're like, oh, actually this is fine. I'm good. Or you like stop buying fast fashion. You're like, what? I'm not going to get those Zara shoes. But you start buying fast fashion for just one season. You're like, wait, I didn't even miss that. That was great. I found these shoes that I've never worn and I love them, you know, in my own closet. So it's like that first step, that first like transition is the hardest. But like, you'll see like, if you continuously work out every day, you'll continue working out. If you continue to floss every day, you'll continuously floss. If you continuously want to be sustainable, it'll just naturally be integrated into your lifestyle. And that's like one of the reasons I'm so devastated about composting, because it was like a ritual I did every weekend, like going to the farmer's market in my paper bag with my compost and buying local veggies. Like, and now I'm like, it's gone. So I actually missed that because it was so integrated.
Totally. And it's rewarding. So how, for people watching that want to become more of an advocate, so not just making changes in their own life, but want to start speaking out or sharing, what are the best resources for them to start to get involved? Are there classes, organizations they should follow? What's the best way for them to become climate advocates, I guess, in their own space?
Yeah, well, before I like share some resources, I think we're now living in a time where everyone, especially if you're tuning in here, everyone has at least that one friend who's like really into sustainability or whatever. Talk to a friend first, because it humanizes their story. It's more personal, and you're not just reading like thousands of articles about like how to be green. You're like learning from your friend who you love and you care about, and you're learning, and then it seems more personable and can resonate in your own lifestyle. And even if you don't have a friend in your friend group, like there's so many people, like if you love food, you know, if you love chocolate, coffee, wine, that's like the first to go because of climate change. Follow a zero waste or low waste or sustainable chef. If you're into fashion, you love clothes, then you can follow someone in sustainable fashion. You know, there's all these amazing outlets now, but I think starting with a friend in your friend group is like the easiest. It's like the gateway sustainability hack. And then some resources, the Slow Factory, which is a nonprofit. It's an amazing nonprofit. We actually, I actually worked with them, and I know so much about landfills because we directed a documentary about the biggest landfill in the US, which is in Pennsylvania. But I'm going to write it here. Okay, so they're offering, the Slow Factory is offering the Sustainable Literacy course, which is every Friday. Every Friday, Celine, who's the founder, she's offering a sustainable literacy course for, I think, 3 or 4 weeks. And it's just like giving you sustainability 101, the background, decolonization, how that's played a role, like everything that you might want to know from. And it's accessible and it's principal and it's donation based. So it's open education. If you know, that's a nonprofit. Another nonprofit I love and work with about oceans is Lonely Whale. I love Lonely Whale, and because
Lonely Whale, I'll have to look at them.
Yeah, it's Adrian Griner and a few other. He started this nonprofit. Yeah, but it's amazing for ocean activism. If you like grew up by the ocean, here's the thing: pick something that you're passionate about and start there. If you grew up near the beach your entire life and you love to surf, start with ocean activism. If you love food, start with food activism. You love fashion, start with fashion activism. Right. I think that's like an easy way to get into sustainability.
Yeah, for anyone who hasn't checked them out. Oh, am I back?
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely check out Slow Fact. Lean and Colin are awesome, like super nice, super engaging. Their whole focus is about like sustainability, education, and literacy.
Yeah.
And they're offering this course basically for free. You can make a donation, but that's and it's also just an incredible community of people around the world, like our age, but you know, different ages as well, that want to get involved. So that would be a great place to start.
Yeah. And then, yeah, there's also like, I still love Al Gore. He's like OG, but there's also like really fascinating people. There's this one person on Instagram called the Trash Walker, and she literally goes to like CVS and different big corporations that throw out like so much inventory. She collects it from their trash and then she donates it to people in need. So she like goes to CVS, they throw out so much like food that's like perfectly intact or items, beauty products, and she'll donate them. And it's just like interesting learning about like the ins and outs of like which corporations you actually want to support based off of their actions that aren't at the forefront.
Okay, I need to follow her immediately. Those are amazing recommendations. Okay, a couple of quick questions. And then we can wrap up. So Katie's son says, how can we positively influence the people around us to live more sustainably without resorting to negative tactics like shaming?
Totally. Yeah, that's such a good question. And at the beginning, we were talking about shaming doesn't get anyone anywhere. And like, even think about it from a perspective, when you shame a child, does the child actually change their behavior, or do they just like, you know, keep going and is rebellious? So it's not about shaming. It's about like planting a seed for your friends. So if it's about like, you know, like them using single-use plastic, but them eating meat, whatever it is, start talking about it in a way that only talk about yourself, not being like, you know, if you did this, like talk about yourself. You're like, I've been, you know, feeling so much more health benefits. Have better digestion because I don't eat meat, or I've been doing this, and talk about your journey in a way where you're like, you're like just got back from an exciting trip and you're talking about your travel. But talk about it in that way. And when you're excited about something, your friends want to join because they want to be part of this excitement and this movement. So instead of being like, you know, you should really stop using single-use plastic bottles, you should be like, it's been so fun to like, you know, always bring this water bottle. I always have it. Like, it's always at my workout class. And that's that. Yeah, excite them and plant that seed. And slowly and surely it will like, you know, that seed will grow into a plant and they'll start being like, oh, okay, maybe I'll try this, you know?
Yeah, I love that. One last question. I can't believe I didn't ask you. What are you doing to live sustainably as far as fashion? This is from Pam.
Yeah.
Like maybe like brands you like. What do you do with clothes when you're done with them? Are you on a resale platform? Can we buy your old clothes? Do you rent?
Yeah. So that's a great question. For fashion, I actually, well, when I was at Vogue, when you're an editor and you're being surrounded by clothes, the last thing you want to do is to buy more clothes, if that makes sense. It's like my friends who are professional chefs at restaurants, the last thing they want to do when they get home is to make another meal for themselves. So I actually like stopped buying so much clothes when I was at Vogue because I was just constantly surrounded by it. And then now I buy like clothes that are either sustainable, or I usually just like basically only buy when I travel, or it's vintage brands, or you know when you travel and you go to a vintage store and it's like this piece, like it reminds you of the trip itself. So that, or brands that I want to support that are independent designers, small businesses that I want to support in that way. I also I think with rentals you have to be careful because like there's been a lot of research done. You have to look at the life cycle assessment of a rental. So let's say, if not trying to call out any company or brand, but if you're renting from somewhere and they only have one warehouse and it's halfway across the country and they have to dry clean it every time, the life cycle assessment of that rental company is actually like the carbon footprint is very, very high. So there's this rental app that I use called Wardrobe, and I have my clothes there that I don't use, and I rent it out. And Wardrobe, it's on Instagram, it's Wear Wardrobe. It's like, I think it's
Wear Wardrobe.
Yeah, Wear.wardrobe or Wear Wardrobe, one of those. But what they do is they
rental then? Yeah.
What?
I'm sorry, keep going.
It's a local rental service. So they localize it. So you only rent from closets that are, and what they do in your app is that they partner with dry cleaners. So I can pull up the app and be like, oh, I'm in the East Village. I have this random last event tonight. I need a red carpet dress. And then I look at all the dry cleaners in my area and I'm like, okay, these are what's available. And then I return it to that area. So I'm like literally picking it up, or if they drop it off, I know they're only traveling like a few blocks. So it's like it's localized rental.
That's amazing. Yeah. No, I mean, we don't have time to get into it now, but shipping, returns, and logistics, and kind of that back end to power e-commerce, it's part of the biggest carbon footprint right now in retail.
Yeah, that overhead is huge.
It's also doesn't allow brands to be sustainable with spend, which is why you see so many brands raising so much money, etc. And then Wear Wardrobe, definitely checking that out.
Yeah.
And then where do you take clothes when you're done with them? Do you donate? What's the best way to get rid of clothes?
Yeah, that's such a great question. And that's something I'm constantly testing out and figuring out. I'm actually doing another documentary with Slow Factory about where our clothes go when we donate it, because it's been ruining like third world countries' local economies in their fashion.
Right.
Like Tom's shoes, I'm sure some of you guys may know, but like it really destroyed a lot of local shoe economies in specific countries. And it goes more nuanced than that. But when I donate, so you basically want to keep your clothes in the cycle of sales as much as possible, because then it's of value. So if I can resell it, if I'm not renting it out, then I can resell it, then I'm going to resell it. And the thing about the resale market is that that's why fast fashion is another reason to stop using fast fashion, is because fast fashion doesn't have any value. Sorry, what was the question about fashion that we're talking
about donation and how you're going to work on the matter with Slow Factory about where your clothes go and can destroy third world economies or developing economies.
So another fun, interesting thing in this documentary, basically we're doing research now, and there's textile landfills in Ghana, in Vietnam, in China, where basically like instead of going to a landfill and it's like all post-consumer waste, it's basically landfills that's just only textiles. So you're walking on mountains and mountains of clothes, like super high, and as far as the eye can see is like donated t-shirts and, you know, H&M this or whatever, fast fashion this, t-shirts, jeans, shoes, whatever it is. And so textile landfills, that blows my mind.
Yeah.
So anyways, so I donate to housing.
They don't break down, and they have a lot of plastics and different chemicals and the dyes and the treatments. The adhesives that are used.
Yeah, and I heard this from the Or is Present. She does a lot of work with textile waste in Ghana, and she was saying that statistically there's actually enough clothes in the world to
Yeah.
dress humanity until the end of time. Like that's how many textiles are actually like exist now, like
Wow.
articles of clothing. So we never have to make a new article of clothing if we never wanted to, because it already exists. So, but then if I donate, and if I have to donate, if I can't resell or anything of those, or it's like,
Right.
or I try to work, especially the things that you can't usually donate, like underwear, undergarments, you can't usually donate. So I try to use Nikki, which is also a circular system, or t-shirts is 4 days. They're a circular system, so
Yeah.
I know that it's going back into the production cycle. But I would donate to like Housing Works, because Housing Works is independent, it's local, it provides jobs, and I feel a little bit better about knowing
Yeah.
that it might not go into a
Right.
track.
No, that's a great suggestion. I think as much as possible with donation, it's about looking for local. But even like as far as like, I know this conversation is supposed to be about circular economy. It's if there's a way to resell or re-gift or keep that product in use as long as possible, we need to get the most use we can out of these products before sending them to a landfill or an incinerator. Because right now we've kind of decimated a lot of these developing countries by sending all this textile waste.
Yeah.
A lot of them aren't accepting old clothing anymore.
Yeah, exactly. Which is, which, you know, then
You,
that means, and
yeah,
that, and also we're like, governments are paying millions of dollars to accept waste, like our waste. I was in Haiti a few years ago with a sustainable travel company, and Haiti used to have like the most amazing tailors, artisans. They would wear these incredible fabrics, and each person would make like a hand tailored to themselves, like dress, like the women wear all these dresses and stuff. And
yeah,
because of the donation industry, their local fashion industry doesn't even barely exist anymore. You go down the streets of Cap Haitian and it's just like just mountains and piles, just like mountains of piles of donated clothes.
yeah. It's crazy. One place I would say that I think is doing it somewhat right is Souls for Souls, for anyone listening. They
Yeah.
do have old shoes, because I know we were mentioning Toms before the live cut off. What they do that's a little different is they collect your old shoes, and then if they're in good enough condition to be donated, they donate them to entrepreneurs in third world countries so that they're actually fueling a local resale economy
Yeah.
rather than just gifting shoes and undercutting the local market, because that's what happens is you end up putting local shoe salesmen and local business or retailers out of business.
Yeah.
There's
And
influx of like cheap clothing.
yeah, another nonprofit I want to mention is, I have a lot of like more professional looking clothes, and there's this one nonprofit called Dress for Success, and you donate semi-professional or professional articles of clothing, and they donate it to women who can't afford to buy an interview outfit for, who aren't in the financial means to do it, and so they work with women in that area. And
Yeah.
it really broke my heart. You remember when Barney's went bankrupt? And Barney's, basically, they had a foreclosure, and then they had all this inventory left in New York, both stores in Madison and Midtown. And what happened, instead of them, like, I don't know, they could have done so much with that inventory, donated it. They basically threw it out on the curbside, slashed some things and threw it out on the curbside. And, I think the New York Magazine posted a picture of like this, like on the curbside, like people going through all these trash bags that had like brand new designer ready to wear labels, because they just didn't do anything with the inventory. There's so much inventory, and it's like they could have donated all that brand new product to a nonprofit like Dress for Success, and made such a difference, but they just like threw it to the curbside. Which I can't even imagine like these designers who spend so much time and energy and creativity, their lives sacrificing for their artwork, and then it just goes straight to landfills, like not even to a consumer.
Totally. No, that was disheartening. But I don't know exactly what happened with Barney's, but I remember that photo. But right now, it's actually a problem with the tax code. If you can't sell something as a brand, like you're incentivized to burn it for a tax, for a liability write-off, rather than like donate or gift or recycle.
Yeah.
That's going to be something that has to change for the next few years.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Sophia, oh, sorry, what?
Oh no, I was just gonna say as a reminder, like when life picks up back again after this pandemic, you'll see all the retailers have either huge markdowns because they're trying to get rid of spring inventory that they weren't able to sell while we've been on a, a few month long lockdown, and to really consider your purchasing decisions when you're buying something that's on markdown, because that's not conducive, I think, to the brand or the consumer, and also what these big companies that can even afford to have markdowns is that they're destroying all the small fashion and independent small business brands that can't afford to have markdowns.
Yeah, 100%. I think it's the same thing as voting with your dollars with sustainable purchases or no single-use plastic. It's find brands that you like that have a fair price for what they're offering and support them kind of at full price, so we don't get into this markdown extra inventory cycle.
Yeah. Let's end this vicious cycle once and for all. Like, we have the opportunity. This is a reset on so many levels. So let's not forget the lessons that we're learning right now.
Exactly. Okay, Sophia, any last things that you want to share?
Well, I just want to share that, like, we're doing, this is Circularity Week and everyone's celebrating Earth Week, and everyone's going to be seeing so much content just on their feeds this week, and that's so awesome and much needed. But for everyone to remember that Earth Week extends past just like 1 week in April, and to be conscious of that and to be like voracious supporters about the care of our planet no matter what. And it doesn't even have to be like on your platform. It could be like with your friend group, with one person, with your family, whatever it is. And when Earth Day, this is the 50th anniversary of Earth Day, and everyone's like, happy 50 years. But it's like, obviously Earth has existed longer than 50 years. But also when Earth Day was started 50 years ago, the environment was in such a better place, and we didn't even understand global warming and climate change scientifically. Right. And now that we do, we can't just celebrate 24 hours for Earth. We can't just celebrate 7 days for the planet. So to know that past this week, next week, you definitely won't see as much content, but that doesn't mean these problems still don't exist and need attention and constant fighting for.
Absolutely. And I think so much of what you shared today, I think it's nice to have a week or a moment where everybody's talking about it, to kind of build that excitement and that feeling that we're all in it together. But then you continue to follow the people you've discovered this week, like support good programming, support great nonprofits, and start to make some of these changes in your daily life go forward.
Yeah, and really just vote for representatives that support what the kind of world you want to live in, whether it be the Green New Deal or whether it be a local representative that you want composting to come back. I think a lot of the administration right now, the national administration, has cut so many environmental policies because the pandemic has just been an excuse for it. And it's just, to be aware of that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Hey, well, Sophia, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Chloe.
Yeah. We only got cut off once. I think we got to most of the questions, but everyone, thank you so much for tuning back in. And Sophia, this was incredible. We're going to be downloading this and posting it on IGTV so we have it, so people that couldn't make it can tune in. But I think it's really important to keep having conversations like this that are more casual and personal. And as you said, that are more like talking to a friend about their own journey.
Yeah. And I hope like our excitement just like was able to transfer past the screen, and people are excited as well. Because
I wasn't like too stiff.
No. Sustainability is exciting. I think everyone's like, oh, the end of the world, it's an emergency, but it's like, it's exciting. We're taking care of our planet, it's exciting. We want to take care of our homes, And
it's an opportunity for your individual action to make a difference.
Yeah.
Which I think 100%. Is awesome. And I think there's like great things, like ThreadUp has a quiz about the impact of your wardrobe, where you can really see the impact that you as an individual are making. And those things are really empowering.
Yeah.
So
And then I'll send you, if anyone has any, has like doubts about how to shop consumerism, I wrote an article about how to shop sustainably, and it's like a flow chart of all the decisions.
I saw
So
that. I'd
yeah,
love to link out to it actually.
yeah. So I can send that. So
okay. Yes. All right. Well, everyone for watching, thank you so much. This is Circularity Week at Thousand Fell. We are all about, like, our whole mission, and Stuart and my mission is about helping transition to a circular economy. And we've just started with sneakers as one product, but we're really deeply engaged with recycling, designing for recycling, thinking about reducing waste in our daily lives. So we have a lot of other programming this week. This is one of the most exciting ones. So it's early in the week, but tonight we're doing a Zoom. If anybody wants to join, just DM us and I'll send you the Zoom link with the Chief Sustainability Officer of Madewell and Maggie Marilyn, the designer, and Natasha Frank of Eon. And what she's doing is super cool. She's using RFID threads and NFC chips to power digital mapping of product for circularity, so things can really be recycled in any economy. So that was like a lot of words, but she's going to explain what that means. So thank you so much for joining, and I hope to see you guys throughout the week.
Yeah, thank you guys.
Bye, Sophia.
Bye.
Bye, thank you.